Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 27. We're taking a look at the man behind the Lions, Warren Gatland, OBE, and we're asking, Lions hero or coaching zero? You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hey guys, welcome back. It's episode 27. As promised, we're doing a Warren Gatland special today. Look at the man behind the Lions. I'm joined, as always, by Dan. Hello, mate.
Morning, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm pretty excited about this weekend, and so I think it's very apt that we're looking at the man himself, the head coach for this Lions tour, and just seeing what he's all about.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's been actually, I've actually found it quite interesting. There's things about him that I hadn't really known before until I started looking a bit deeper. But yeah, like you say, this weekend is huge. I can't wait for it. It will be whatever happens, it's going to be a hell of a game.
Yeah. Well, look, what I thought we'd do is just a quick kind of synopsis of Warren Gatland, the man, in his career, and then obviously move on to the bit that people are probably most interested in, which is, how he's getting on this Lions tour and what our kind of opinions are of him. So I thought, I'll go through some bits now. So Warren Gatland, OBE, I didn't know that. Born in 1963, so he's 53 years old. In Hamilton, in New Zealand, married to Trudy, kids, Bryn, who we obviously saw in the opening Lions fixture against the Provincial Barbarians, and his daughter Gabby. As a player, he played for Waikato, not the Chiefs, because I don't think they existed at the time, just their standard divisional side. But he He played in 140 games for them, which at the time was a record. So one of their long-standing players back then. He began his career as a coach in 1989 for Taupiri, I think is how you say it. He was a player coach for them. And they went on tour to Ireland, where he decided to stay put. So he became the coach for Galwegians rugby club following that tour. And in 1994, went back to New Zealand to coach Thames Valley. He then went back to Ireland. So clearly there was something he enjoyed about the whole Ireland-New Zealand connection, because he bounced back between them for a while. So 96, Connaught, director of rugby, back in Ireland, and then became the Irish national coach in 1998. His career with them was kind of mixed. I mean, he moved them from 8th to 6th in the world, which is obviously decent, but he only had a 47% win rate, and he was given the sack in 2001, which is when he then became the Wasps coach and ultimately went on to become their director of rugby. And I think this is probably where career really took a sort of step up, because with Wasps they won the Premiership title in 2003, 2004 and 2005, which is a phenomenal effort. They won the EU Challenge Cup in the 2002-03 season, and they won the Heineken Cup in the 2003-04 season. So really, really good stats there with Wasps.
That's also where he would have met a younger Rob Howley, and
yeah.
I'd imagine that partnership has seemed to have formed since.
Yeah, we'll come on to it, but yeah, it's interesting because he seems to have gone in one direction, and in my opinion, Rob Howley hasn't quite followed in his shadow, despite the sort of the level that his career has taken into in terms of results and things. It hasn't quite panned out in the same way. But yeah, we'll come on to that in a moment, because there's something interesting in that. 2005, he went back to New Zealand again, became the coach of Waikato, where he'd previously been a player. Not the Chiefs again, but they did exist at this stage. And actually in the off season in 2006, he kind of helped out with them and became a sort of, not the coach, but played a role, certainly. It was then November the 9th, 2007, when he was announced as the new Wales coach. And annoyingly, his opening game, his first fixture as the Wales coach, was when Wales beat England 26-19, their first win at Twickenham since 1988. So boo. Same year they won the Grand Slam, so I guess it's like, fair enough. That was a great year for them. 2009, he went on his first Lions tour as the forwards coach under Ian McGeechan, with the Lions to South Africa, that was. And then in 2011, which I actually think is probably one of their better stats, despite all the Grand Slams and things. They came fourth in the 2011 Rugby World Cup, but they lost to France in the semi 9-8. So, they were inches from making a World Cup final under Warren Gatland only a few years after he joined them, which is a hell of an effort.
It's a great effort. And that match, I remember that 9-8 match, it was when Sam Warburton unfortunately got sent off fairly early on.
Yes.
So they did really well to even get, to make the match so close. And Mike Phillips scored a really good try, I remember, which at one point looked like they may even have a chance to nick it from them. And if they'd got the conversion, they would have. But unfortunately, they didn't.
Yeah, well, exactly. 2012 then, they won their second Grand Slam under Warren Gatland. I think it was their 10th or their 11th Grand Slam sort of ever. But obviously, always a great result when you get Grand Slam. And as we know, they're so hard to get. So that takes us then into 2013 and his first Lions tour as the head coach in Australia, where, of course, they won the series 2-1, which was a great result. This is where I wanted to mention about Rob Howley, because he obviously Warren took a hiatus from coaching Wales while he went on tour, during which time Wales dropped to 10th in the world rankings, the lowest ever position that they've held. So not the best result for Howley. Obviously, you're missing players, so there's only so much you can do. And if you go on one of these tours with a young, inexperienced side and you don't get the results, these things can happen. So I guess you kind of look past that a little bit, but yeah, not ideal. It was also an interesting tour because he was heavily criticised for playing too many Welsh players, for taking too many Welsh players. And interestingly, it was despite saying that Graham Henry had done exactly the same thing in 2001 and that he felt that Graham Henry had got it completely wrong for taking too many Welsh players. So that didn't go down particularly well with the other home nations. He also dropped Brian O'Driscoll, which was a hell of a call, because obviously Brian O'Driscoll was pretty much a Lions hero for most people, regardless of whether you're Irish or not. It was not a popular decision, but annoyingly it was heavily vindicated, because the Lions went on to have a record win 41-16 in the final game to clinch the series. So there was obviously, I think people continue to hold resentment because of that, but you can't look past the fact that him selecting, I think, 11 Welsh players in the starting 23 was obviously vindicated because of the result.
It was a tricky one but Wales had, I believe, they'd won the Six Nations that year. They'd actually done a real job on England in the final match in Cardiff. So there was a part of you thinking, fine, in theory, they're the best home nation team at the moment. So you can let it go. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt he favoured the Welsh, and he's done it again.
Yes. And
he does favour the Welsh, which just feels so wrong and so anti what the Lions is about. Which is frustrating.
I guess he's not the only person to have done it. Clive Woodward obviously did it in 2005 with England, favouring, quite a few. There were obviously a lot of players from the England side that deserved to be in part of that tour, but there were a lot that got included as the sort of, if in doubt, here's a handful of extras to bulk up your midweek team, where there were probably players from the other nations that deserved that place more. I guess it must be quite difficult when you're a Lions coach, but also a national coach, and you know some of these players that you coach regularly, inside and out, and you're making a toss-up between, well, his stats say he's slightly better, but I know this guy, and I know what he can do, and I know how he plays, and I know he knows how to play my game plan. So I'm not justifying it, because I agree with you completely. The Lions is a unique concept, and it has to be about form. But I kind of can sort of get in the head of the coach when it comes to selection, and I understand why they might go down that route, as annoying as it is for everybody else.
So it was quite interesting. I read this article. It was about somebody, a friend of his back from New Zealand, and he did written an article in, I can't remember what paper it was, but just about Warren Gatland, and saying that Warren Gatland is an incredibly loyal man, and this fella whose name escapes me, his coaching was going really poorly, and then when Warren Gatland was over in Ireland, he brought him over to Ireland to be a sort of coach with him. I believe that was when they were at Connaught, and brought him over to help coach. And you're thinking, as a man, I think that's a nice trait to have, and I respect him for that. But I think my point is, at elite level sport, can you afford to do that? And this is where it gets tricky, because yes, you want somebody who the players know is going to be loyal to them, somebody who's going to have their back, but at what cost? You don't also want somebody who half the players know has got their back, the others think I've got no chance because he knows these guys, he's closer with them. And I fear that's what's happened on the last two Lions tours. Now, the problem is, like, obviously, like we say, 2003, it got vindicated because we ended up winning the tour. If we go on and win on Saturday, which I hope to God we do, again, all this will be forgotten.
Yeah.
So it's.
But it doesn't change the fact that you're right. It's not the way to do things. Although, having said that, in December 2013, he was named the UK Coach of the Year at the UK Coaching Awards. So clearly, the majority of the UK felt that, or at least whoever the panel was, probably all Welsh, felt that he had done a good enough job, I guess, with both the Lions and Wales to justify that award. So there are definitely people out there that have love for the man.
Yeah, and he is a great coach. He's done some really good stuff in his coaching career. My personal view is, as a coach, I think he's brilliant. As a Lions coach, I don't think he's right.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. But yeah, like you say, as much as we like to kind of moan about Warren Gatland, if he can get the win, if he can pick the right side that goes on to beat the All Blacks next weekend, he will be vindicated. And do you know what? I'm okay with that.
Something I also saw, which I don't really understand how, is he played 17 times for the All Blacks, but none of them were international. So he doesn't actually have an international cap. I don't really understand 17. Like, I might get once if they played against like the Barbars or something, but I don't really understand how you play 17 times without getting an international cap. I'm not sure if you know any more about that.
I don't. I'm trying to think when it would have been, and perhaps it would have been at a time when they just didn't play very many international matches.
Yeah.
Or maybe because they weren't playing as many international matches, they played a lot more friendlies.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And also, I think on those tours back then, if you went on tours, quite often you'd play against the local teams. I know, like, for example, if you go to Wales, quite often you'd play against Cardiff Blues or the equivalent back then. And I guess he played those matches. But then once it came to the test matches, it would have been, well, I'd imagine it was Sean Fitzpatrick at the time.
Yeah, well, actually, when I mentioned that he went on tour to Ireland, that was with New Zealand. I don't know if I clarified that. It wasn't with his club side. It was with New Zealand, and he stayed put over there. And he stayed put with the Galwegians rugby club. So maybe they played them. Maybe they played random rugby clubs and things back then. The game was very different, wasn't it? So as good as the elite players were, it wasn't what elite players are today. So maybe they did play a lot more games of that nature. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Another interesting one. So in 2015, obviously, I say interesting, highly disappointing. We were both there. Wales obviously beat England in their home World Cup in the pool stage in the group of death. Effectively knocking us out of the World Cup, because at the time Australia were almost guaranteed to make it through, and so it really was between England and Wales. So that was hugely disappointing. And he did it all with a lot of kind of heavy criticism from the Welsh fans, because he played, I think it was just before the World Cup, their final warm-up game. He played basically his first team, and I think he got about 3 injuries for major players. And as we know, in that game, I think England took out about 4 of their key players. So they were suffering real serious injury problems, which just made us think that the game was in the bag for England, and they still managed to grind out the win. And I guess, fair play to them. It was one of those days, wasn't it, when they just sort of said, we're going to do this for the guys that aren't here, and we should have put it to bed, and we didn't. We opened up gaps, and certain decisions were made that probably shouldn't have been made, and as a result, it was all over.
Yeah, I think that was probably more that was probably more down to England throwing it away than coaching brilliance, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's. I'm not putting this one on Warren Gatland, but still an achievement under his reign. It was actually earlier that year, so in March, Neil Francis, the former Irish international, described Warren Gatland as having the intellectual capacity of a tub of flora.
I read that as well. I don't know why. I read that, but I didn't understand what the background.
No, well, that was the same. I don't know what it was in regard to. I can only assume he was still bitter about the 2013 Lions dropping of O'Driscoll. I think Ireland hate him more than England when it comes to rugby, Wales versus any of the other home nations. So we'll assume that's what it is. I'm not even sure what it means, to be honest. But there you go. That's
it. Doesn't sound positive, mate. I think it's probably it's trying to be a fairly harsh dig at him, but it's interesting because I've read a few things. There are a few people who are not that big of fans of him. I mean, there was an article by Adam Jones actually, and this wasn't necessarily about Warren Gatland as a man. So this is where I find things a little bit contradictory. So Adam Jones was saying, I think Adam Jones was on sort of 95 caps or things, and he just got dropped and dismissed by Gatland, with very little sort of human factor involved in it, which for somebody who's played 95 times, you'd expect to sort of sit down and talk. So he does make tough decisions. And he does, I guess as an international coach, you're always going to have those tough decisions. And it does seem that he's not afraid to do it. I'm afraid to go sort of against the grain. But then he does also sometimes, like the Welsh thing, I don't know if that's down to loyalty. He almost seems scared to upset the WRU.
Yeah, it's a weird one because you're right. He does make calls that aren't necessarily the popular ones. Which we know is a good thing. I mean, look what Eddie Jones does. He creates an atmosphere where it doesn't matter how much of a kind of, inked in first name on the team sheet you think you are, your position is always up for grabs. So it kind of forces players to keep pushing. But I guess the difference between England and Wales is that England have a bigger pool to pick from. So it's probably much harder to do in Wales. And so then it becomes a case of you're being selective about who you put under pressure. And maybe that's the problem. But you're right. There definitely seems to be this keeping the WFU, is it? Or WRFU? WRU. There it is. WRU. There's definitely an element of keeping them happy. But to what degree I'm not sure. But it's interesting, and we've touched on it in past episodes about the idea that perhaps some of the Lions call-ups, those midweek kind of late call-ups was partly along those lines as well. A case of saying, well, look, he'd made a promise to them to give some players an opportunity to get some experience for the future of Welsh rugby. And if that is true, and I don't know if we'll ever find out, that's disgraceful.
Yeah, I can't see that being true. I must admit, I just can't. As much as anything, I don't think the Welsh Rugby Union would do it. I don't think they'd compromise themselves like that. But there may have been an unspoken sort of, an unofficial sort of slight agreement. But yeah, I mean, we've covered that so many times, so we don't necessarily need to go over that all over again. But it was just, it still absolutely baffles me. I still have no idea what was going on there.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, let's kind of get on to the current Lions tour. That's the key thing right now. He was named as the head coach in 2016. No, it would have been before that, actually, I would think. No, I don't know. 2015, 2016 he was named, but obviously for the 2017 tour to his home country of New Zealand. And obviously that's where we are now. Just as a sort of synopsis of his career, 47% win rate with Ireland, 50% win rate with Wales, and so far a 60% win rate with the Lions. Obviously test matches are the only factors, not the midweek games. So, steadily improving. Next week we'll obviously play a big part because that's going to change that 60% fairly significantly. But hopefully...
One way or the other.
Yeah, hopefully it goes up. So yeah, one final little bit of info for you, something you're probably not aware of. 2012, he made a cameo appearance as himself in an episode of the UK TV comedy drama Stella.
I did actually know that. Yeah, I'd completely forgotten it. But as soon as you started that sentence, I knew what you were saying. I never saw that, but good for him.
I didn't either. He's obviously thinking, if my decision making pisses too many people off and I end up losing my job and I can't coach rugby anymore, perhaps there's a job for me in acting. The fact he only made one cameo appearance, I suspect that's not the case, but who knows?
I don't think we'll be seeing him in Hollywood too soon.
No. But yeah, so onto the big, the important stuff. 2017 Lions. It's currently 1-1.
So I've got a question for you here regarding this. Had we not won the test on Saturday, and had we lost 3-0, bearing in mind with everything else that's gone on, could Warren Gatland potentially have destroyed the Lions himself?
I don't think destroyed the Lions. I think because it comes around every 4 years, I think it's one of those things where the media would absolutely jump all over it, and then all this sort of stuff would float around, and then things would go quiet when other rugby events took over, and there's a World Cup to come before the next Lions tour, and then I think following that, all of a sudden everyone would be into Lions again, and forgetting about Warren Gatland because somebody new would be coming in, and so. But I know what you mean. I think it would definitely make some. It's hard to know because obviously there's a lot of chat, isn't there, from clubs at the moment putting pressure on Lions tours not to be so long. And it would be a real shame if any of that resulted in any changes coming to the Lions, because I think it's such an important thing in rugby, certainly in rugby in the British Isles, because it's for so many players it is the pinnacle of their career. So to take away the ultimate goal, I think would be a real shame.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't think it will go away. It's just such an amazing institution, and I think it's just too big to go away. And I hope there's not. I mean, there might inevitably be a few changes, but I hope there's nothing drastic that's changed about it. Yeah. But whilst we're on that, so let's have a quick chat about sort of this Lions tour and this Lions coaching. So I'm going to give sort of my opinion on the coaching team this time round. I think with the exception of Andy Farrell, who I think has done quite a good job in defence, I don't think they've done a good job at all. Our scrummaging hasn't been the force we believed it to be. Our attack play, if you look at sort of Rob Howley as the coach, pretty much all our tries were in broken play. We don't seem to have a huge amount of strike set moves that have paid off. I've been quite underwhelmed by the coaching team as a whole. I think they've been dragged into sort of war of words sometimes, which is a little bit beneath the post of what it is. And then obviously some of the decisions have just been arsehole decisions, quite frankly, with regards to sort of, some people who weren't selected to go on the tour, sort of some who were, and people obviously who joined up sort of halfway through. So overall, I think that's my sort of brief sort of summary of the coaching as a whole. What do you reckon?
I 100% agree with you. But I think it raises an interesting point. With quite a lot of poor coaching, quite a lot of bad decisions, and frankly, not a lot of great rugby being played. Other than like the defence. I think it highlights something more important, which is that the All Blacks are not the force we thought they were, at least not on this tour. That's not to say that they're not obviously a great team and they're not currently the best team in the world, that's not justified. But I think before this tour, people had them on this pedestal that was so high, it was almost out of reach for anyone. And maybe England, with what Eddie Jones is doing, can eventually hope to be able to compete with them, and ideally by 2019. But what this tour tells me is that actually they're beatable now. They
are beatable.
With definitely. A team that plays sensible rugby, that doesn't make huge errors, and with a really sort of structured game plan and the ability to adapt, obviously. But executing the game plans that's put in place, this team can be beaten. So I think that's a really interesting kind of thing that we've learnt, or that I've learnt certainly from this tour, even if not people don't necessarily agree with me. Because I've mentioned this to a few people and I just get shot straight down. What are you talking about? The All Blacks are the best team in the world by a mile. No one can touch them. And I'm thinking, well, one, they've lost one of their 2 games. 2, they, despite the scoreline, they pretty narrowly won the first of those 2 games. They haven't really done much in open play themselves, and they're supposed to be this team that scores tries for fun. Last weekend they didn't score anything, and yes, they were a man down, but the first try that they let in was when it was 14 against 14, and all despite huge kind of penalty count from the Lions. I don't know. I think it's a positive thing. I think it should give the Lions huge hope, because the Lions have the excuse of not knowing each other the way that the All Blacks know each other. And you've touched on this in the last episode, I think, the amount that the Lions can get better far exceeds the amount that the All Blacks can get better as a general rule. Mm-hmm. So regardless of what people think, the fact remains that next Saturday, the account is cleared. It's 1-1. This is now knockout rugby, and literally anything can happen. This could go either way. Yeah. It could be very close, or it might not be very close. But there's no way that the result is in any way set in stone.
No, and I have the belief the Lions can do it. I honestly think I think we sort of playing a bit more rugby than them, and if we just cut out the crap that we did, like our bloody penalty count, if we can just cut that out and do that, I think we will win. I genuinely do.
Well, absolutely.
But yeah, like you say, we're not pretending the All Blacks aren't a brilliant team, and we're not pretending they're not the best in the world. But I agree with you; they are beatable. Well, of course they are. We beat them last weekend.
Yeah, but I think that's it. I think there are other sides, and obviously, as the England Rugby Pod, where our focus is on the England boys, and they are. There's no question for me. They are within touching distance of where the All Blacks are. And I know it's not till next year, but I think when England finally get their chance, I think that will be a hell of a game.
Yes, I think that'll be a really good game. It's the 2018 Autumn Internationals, isn't it? I think that'll be awesome. I think that'll be brilliant.
Yeah. So I think in synopsis of this Lions tour, I think Gatland has probably ensured that he won't get asked to do the job again. I think, as we do, if the Lions do win next weekend, he will be vindicated. He will go back a sort of a semi-hero. But I think, if you look more closely, a lot of mistakes. He's definitely got things wrong. If you're going to make decisions that annoy people, that's one thing. But then stick by them. Don't make a decision and then go, "Ooh, social media tells me I shouldn't do that. Oh, I'm going to stop." Either back your decisions or don't make them in the first place. And I think a lot has to be given to the players over the coaching. Because they're the ones that go out on the pitch and actually do the job. And it doesn't feel like this is a coach's result. Or, the current sort of standing doesn't feel like it's a coach's result. It feels like the players have gone out and had a word with each other and said, come on, as individuals, we know we've got the talent to do this. Let's make it happen. A bit like England in the 2011 World Cup.
Yeah. I think this has been. I think some of the players on this tour have been brilliant, and let's not forget we've got a really good Lions team at the moment. It genuinely is a good team with good players.
So before we call time on this episode, rate Warren Gatland on this tour out of 100, percentage. What do you give him? Out of 10. Let's keep it normal.
Right. So I'm going to do this 2 ways, actually, because I want to be a bit fair to the man. And as a coach overall, and as a Lions coach on this tour, as a coach overall, I will give him a 7 out of 10. For this Lions tour, I will give a 3.5 out of 10.
3.5. Brutal. I like it. I think that's probably fair. I think I might even push to an 8 for his coaching generally. I think what he's achieved with the teams that he's worked with, he's credit where it's due. It's not perfect, but it's good. So I'll give him an 8 overall. And actually, I'll be slightly more generous for the Lions as well, but marginally, I'll give him a 4.
If we win on Saturday, I will be the first to sing his praises, and I will
Yeah,
completely contradict everything I've been saying.
And I'll give him a solid 5.
Yeah. That's very, very noble of you, mate.
Thanks. Well, guys, we'll obviously continue the debate on Twitter at England Rugby Pod if you want to get involved. But thanks again for listening. All of our social media is at England Rugby Pod. The website www.englandrugbypod.com. And as always, what would be great is if you could go onto iTunes, drop us a review, give us a rating. Just let us know what you think. Thanks again for listening. Take care, guys.
Yeah, just take care, guys. Speak soon. Cheers.